in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the Partnerships and Community Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I'm really excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Kristy Touchet. She is the head of HR at SchoolMint. Kristy, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself, including your pronouns, and how did you answer the question when you were younger? What do you want to be when you grow up?
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. So my pronouns, she, her, and I have a different background than most HR people. Growing up, of course, did not think I was going to end up in business. And eventually, when I got to senior in high school, I started studying psychology and fell madly in love with the field. Then went off to college, started studying all of that, but I also found this passion for business. And talking to my guidance counselor, they introduced me to a field called industrial organizational psychology. Didn't have a clue what all that meant, but I started learning quickly. And basically, I always say it's a big fancy word for HR management. And so I went off to Louisiana Tech University, got my my master's. I wish wanted my PhD, my master's in industrial organizational psychology. Though I wanted to stay in Louisiana, I'm a small town girl, didn't really want to leave without the state. So when I went to graduate, there were no jobs around Louisiana, or people didn't know what that was. And because that's early 2000s. Hate to say that, that kind of gives away my age. And then I went back to our university here in Lafayette, got my MBA. Everyone knows what that is, and started my career in that area. I started working in law enforcement when I was in college. That's where I did my internship, workload analysis with our warrants division. And once graduation came around, I started full-time in HR as a production recruiter for an oil and gas company here in Lafayette, and just kind of started taking on new jobs. HR wears so many hats. I don't think people realize how many hats that we put on.
Right.
We do so much more than just taking care of people. And when you're in recruiting, a lot of marketing comes with that. So in that first career, I'm taking on marketing, building ad designs. And next thing I know, I'm running the marketing department as well. And 2015, after doing all those different jobs, the oil field, which was great, started to take his downturn and took a switch to the financial industry and home bank, worked there for 6 years. That was great. I actually just recently left that position. What a wonderful company it is. But I've always wanted to work in technology and HR. So now I'm at SchoolMint.
Incredible. So you touched on this a little bit in terms of your experience and what led you to HR. Now you're leading the team at SchoolMint. What kind of inspired you to join the team there and really lead that function?
Technology is my passion. I love it. And they're a software-based company. I also, about 16 months ago, joined a group, a nonprofit group that we're trying to get a charter school built actually out here in where I'm from in Vermilion Parish. And they actually use the software system for their enrollment platform, which is pretty neat. So I was like, oh, this is fabulous, an opportunity to branch off into different worlds that I'm going to really love.
I love that. I think technology is a really interesting kind of space to be in as well, making processes more efficient and connecting folks as well. I do want to ask you about onboarding because you recently joined the team, and in previous roles that you've been in, I'm sure have so much experience in this as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what is really important to having a successful onboarding experience for a new employee, whether that's milestones or kind of realistic goals there?
Onboarding is probably one of the most important parts. I say onboarding and offboarding. You have to do both, right? And onboarding is your first welcoming into the company, the first chance that you get to make people feel like they belong part of that organization. So starting off on that right foot is key. It's really getting to know the individual. What I liked about SchoolMint is they send actually an email. Hey, they want a photo. They want specific information about you to get to really know you before you even come on board. A lot of companies just, you get the generic information, but it's nice for that simple touch that get to know you as who you are. And I think a lot of organizations need to do that. We've kind of funny in HR, we've gone to where we put everything in general buckets because it's easier, but then we lose the individual part of it. And so the next big piece for me being a tech person, it's got to be seamless. It's got to be easy. And nowadays we are fortunate to have so much technology out there that you can do it. You can do onboarding ahead of the game. You can do all your enrollments. And it should be where people can easily, quickly access it and go through that process, because no one wants the headache of starting a new job, having to move over bank accounts, all of this. So the better that you make it, that part, more rewarding that experience is going to be. And then of course, it's always those, like I was saying, not just the individual, but the little touches too. Everything, if your boss calls you a few days out, hey, I just want to make sure
Yeah.
you're coming. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Those are important questions to ask when you're talking to your employees.
Absolutely. And I appreciate what you mentioned in terms of not only onboarding when someone first joins or kind of before they join the company as well, but also offboarding the full employee life
Yeah.
cycle and understanding that too. And those little touch points to say we care throughout the entire process, that makes a really big difference. And personalization is important as well.
It does. I try to think of it like kind of like the Disney experience, right? You want to give someone an experience from beginning to end, because especially these days, I mean, with the great resignation going on, you want these people to come back. And even if they don't come back, they're brand ambassadors for the rest of your that company. You want them to speak nicely of your organization. So making sure you give that person the dignity and the kindness when they leave, it is huge.
Absolutely. And that's right. Their employer brand kind of manifests throughout their entire kind of life once they're in the company, once they leave the company, and maybe they come back, but you also you're referring other folks as well and talking about where you worked. I do want to kind of talk about company culture, which is a huge part of an employer brand for current and kind of potential candidates as well. There's so many places to do research and talk to folks, but from your perspective, I want to know what are some like qualitative or quantitative ways that you kind of look at company culture at organizations?
There's a multitude. Like when I started at Home Bank, me and actually our marketing director at the time were charged to look at our company values. And initially when we looked at it, you have our executives' opinions, your head top of your group. And then from the HR perspective, we can pull data reports. I can look over at the turnover numbers. I can look at the exit interviews. I have the hard data to see what that tells us. But the next thing that we actually did is simply just going out and interviewing people, asking people, what did they think? And kind of find out. I mean, for the most part, you did see overlap for what the executives were saying and what our people were saying, but there was some differences. And then you can take all that and combine it into basically a story. Your values, your missions, all of that tells a story about who you are and where you're going as an organization. And once you start combining all that, then you can build off of it and enhance your company culture by putting your performance reviews around it, rewarding people around it, talking about it, doing fun games. Simply like at Home Bank, we loved Halloween, so we'd always do something like, because one of our values is we're family, so we'd always throw these big elaborate over the top Halloween events just to engage people. But it's a fun way. So there's a lot of different ways to dig into it. I think sometimes HR people get hung up just on that, the turnover ratio, all of that. Don't get stuck in there, because there's so many pieces to the puzzle when you're looking at it. So make sure you look at all angles when deciding on how you're going to develop and build that culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate what you kind of talked about in terms of going out, interviewing people, asking how they feel about the company culture, getting kind of leadership's perspective and using those data points too. You're right, it's definitely a holistic perspective as well, not just one or
It is.
two data points. And I'm sure that a lot of folks as well had kind of feedback for you, either who came to you in person or just gave it to the company at large through just employee feedback mechanisms as well. In past roles, how have you used kind of employee feedback from the team or the company at large to implement changes, whether that's processes, strategies, or any initiatives, maybe kind of especially over the past years?
Yeah. So feedback is key. So many ways you can get that data. Not just at the end, of course, state interviews, getting all that information way before people actually ever walk out the door. And once you get that, change is slow. So sometimes you'll have to do it in small increments. But I think the key in all of it is communication. So you may not be able to make the changes and make the things that you want to happen now. Your employees may be telling you, they need a better software system, right? It's slowing down their job. great, but we don't have the revenue to give that. But if you start telling people and explaining, hey, we got you, we hear what you're selling us, and let us tell you the steps that we're going to make in that progress. I think a lot of times companies go, oh, I can't do this. And then they shut down. They don't speak to their employees. And then they feel like it goes into this black hole. So if you're going to ever do that and you're going to request feedback, you have to make sure you automatically, as quickly as possible, communicate that back to your people, because you will lose them at some point, or they're going to get very frustrated if you're not being open and transparent with them through the process.
That's definitely something that we have heard as well in terms of, asking for feedback, really encouraging it. And they're like, I gave it. Where did it go? I have not
Yes.
about it. And more likely I'm going to do it next time. It's not as, I don't trust that it's going to be listened to. And you're right. Just having that two-way communication is really important. You mentioned stay interviews, and that has come up a lot in these conversations. Can you, for folks who are listening, define like what a stay interview is as well?
Yeah, so those are simply, in advance of anyone ever leaving, just asking them, why are you staying here? Simply, just that simple. Why? What is the point? What is driving you to feel like this is the right company for you? And you could do it in a lot of different ways. You can, use SurveyMonkey. You can use all these different pulse surveys. Or you can just sit down and have conversations with people. I think all the above is key, because the more information you can get, the better the decisions you have moving forward. And letting people know, okay, this information I'm getting, and we're going to implement the best way we possible. Again, that communication and follow up behind it is huge.
Absolutely. Not a one and done. It's definitely follow up,
No.
continuous communication, and really building that trust as well to make sure that people do feel like you're listening to them as well, even if you can't act on it tomorrow. And I think a lot of reasons why people either really stay and enjoy their role or end up leaving is because of perhaps their manager or someone they work with on day to day. In your experience, what resources are really important to equip individual contributors to become people, managers, team leads?
Day-to-day resources. God, there's so many. Now the world has changed so quickly in the last just 10 years of my career. You can get information anywhere. Just Google. That's one way to do it. You have companies and organizations like SHRM and different HR groups that provide all these tools. But I think also having someone in-house to help with training and develop is key. At Home Bank, what we did over the last year was actually push to hire a head of talent development. And that individual came with such a strong background in training and development that allowed us to utilize different ways to engage people in that area. So it's not just, it's never a one size fits all when it comes to resources, whether it's going to be technical, computer, or in-person events, which I know COVID has made that very difficult these days. But you can even find ways to engage people on virtual platforms, which was something that I learned during as well. But the easiest way to start, honestly, just Googling stuff and learning that way. Podcasts like this are also a great resource.
Absolutely. There are so many resources out there. And I think to your point as well, in terms of companies and resources, it is a full-time job to think about professional development and talent, and understanding what folks need to be successful. And there are other folks at the company. So cohort-based learning is also really important too. You mentioned kind of adjusting during the past, couple of months, I would say 2 years, to virtual engagement. And I think a lot of people have been talking about this innovation in human resources. It's a great time, either at a company you've been at or things you've seen out in the world. What's an example of innovation in human resources that you encourage others to implement at their organization, or anything like that?
Remote work is probably the biggest key innovation when it comes to HR, because a lot of us had to pivot pretty quickly when it came to that. So you saw a lot of those changes. HR has undergone, even before COVID, massive amount of changes in our world. We are no longer that group that just does paper and here's your onboarding. That's all now paperless for most organizations. So our job is really to become a very, very strategic partner with our executive management team. our job is to try to figure out by looking at data, analyzing it, and talking to our employees one-on-one to understand what is going to be the next thing that is going to motivate our employees to move forward. Organizations are only good as the people that work for them. They really are. And I know you hear that all the time, but it's facts. And if you can get them into that area that's engaged and look outside, I always look outside the United States too, because another thing that we do sometimes, we get so involved in our own world that we don't get a chance to look outside and see what are other places, other countries doing, and what are those results and those studies showing. When it comes to time off or, any of those things, it's good to pick up best practices from different places.
Mhm.
Like I said, there's never a one size fits all.
No, never a one size fits all. And there are really great examples out there. There are a lot of case studies, and looking outside of the US as well. And just kind of global trends is also important. My personal favorite is 4-day work week. Maybe we'll come to
Yes.
that soon. But I wanted to ask your opinion as well, because I saw in your bio you have so much experience in HR and in the industry, I think 17 plus years. What's a major kind of shift from when you started to now that you've seen that is either positive, negative, or in between?
I think the biggest and most positive shift is taking the focus just away from, the word diversity to inclusion and belonging. We sometimes people get so bogged up in these numbers, but the truth is we should never look at things as numbers and data. We should look at it as the human being, and it's a more personal aspect, where now we are focused on how we can, as an organization, make sure that each individual person has a place in this company. And that's really huge. That helps not just your bottom line, but it also helps the mental health of your employees. That's another factor that has changed drastically. I found in HR, we started off being more of that business hardcore, where I'm seeing that shift where people, a lot of HR professionals, are really focusing on how we can provide resources to our employees to help their mental health. That's huge. I appreciate those changes, and I see some great things coming out of that. I know we still have a long way to go, but just changing how we are responding and the words that we're actually using, I think is going to be great for the future.
Absolutely. I think especially over, recently that mental health has become a large part of the conversation at work. And it's kind of been, I would say, less stigmatized to talk about it with your manager, with your team, taking a mental health day, understanding that everybody has lots of things going on outside of their kind of day job as well. And really providing that support system is important. What's the next problem or situation you're currently trying to solve, or what's taking up the most brain space as you're heading into kind of this new role?
I think right now the number one thing that most HR people are talking about right now is COVID mandate and how we're going to implement this piece. But I mean, that is for us in HR. I feel like in the last another 10 years or so, our legal environment has changed so rapidly. I'm kind of getting used to that and adjusting to it. But going back to the mental health care, I think that's going to be the biggest piece. How can we as an organization support our employees? Traditionally we give EAPs, but there's other ways. Simply just talking to your people. I know in America, I learned this trick that I hadn't heard before. But when you ask someone how they're doing, usually people always give you this generic response. Oh, I'm fine. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
How are you? It's just that same thing. But if you immediately follow back up with, no, how are you really doing? You
Mhm.
all of a sudden see this barrier come down, and you get people actually starting to open up. I think a lot of HR professionals, we need to start asking those questions to our people and managers, because you'll be quick to find out like the things that are going on in people's lives and how it's impacting them. And once people can start talking about it and really feeling like they can do that freely in an organization, they're going to bond more with you and the company. And you're going to have someone who's going to stay longer and feel more connected and happy. And it's going to go so much further. So even if it's that simply just asking those questions to your people. And then I was on a conversation the other day, and one of the individuals, and I had never seen it this way, which was pretty eye-opening for me, when we were talking about mental health care and belonging. She was indicating saying, words like belonging and inclusion is really they're just phrases as long as organizations keep hierarchies. Um, why is it causing that? Because with hierarchies, people are fighting for limited resources. And as long as they have limited resources, they're fighting each other. There's never going to be that sense of belonging out there, that closeness, that friendship, that bond that you build with one another. And, even before she said that, I know through MBA school and all of that, flat organizations run better. They
Yeah.
do, they're more productive. And that ties into that theory right there, that it also would help with mental health care by reducing all those barriers for our employees.
I think that's an interesting reframe as well. And it's definitely related to mental health, well-being, both mental and physical, and just kind of your mindset going into work as well. And really understanding what the goal of how we're defining inclusion and belonging to. Kristy, is there anything that I either didn't ask in our conversation that you want to share with people who are listening, or maybe, one or two key takeaways you want to underscore for folks?
Another thing is in HR, we really have to stop thinking in HR terms. A lot of times we have to become a business partner. You need to learn things like marketing and finance and accounting. You need to know how all the different areas work. You need to get outside that box. It is key. Another thing is really, we do have to take care. I'm trying to think of another piece. Mental health care. I stress this. I cannot stress this enough.
Right.
Our people are extremely important, and there's got to be innovative ways. So I would tell people to also start, focusing on psychology, understanding how that impacts what we do day to day. And, last but not least is HR people. You are brand ambassadors for your organization. So how you manage and deal with things, you represent the organization. And so that you do have to hold yourself to a certain standard.
Absolutely. I think those are good calls to action to close out our conversation. Kristy, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course. And as a reminder, folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in that employee feedback management as a requirement for the company to succeed on a whole. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.